Okay, we're interviewing today Aunt Leona Jacobson, and she is the daughter of Francis and Alex Pagro. And Aunt Leona, you want to tell when you were born?
Well, I was born on the old farm home on the Brunswick Road on March 21st, 1912. So at this time, I'm 88 years old, will be 89 in next March. And let's see, I had two half-brothers and two full sisters, and they were both named Bertha. One died at the age of 2, and the other died at the age of let's see, she was just 12 years old. And that was the year when I was born that she died. And there weren't any cars around. There was still snow on the ground when I was born. My mother told me the snow was as high as the fence posts. So you can imagine there was no traffic, no cars or anything, just horses and sled. And let's see. Well, that takes care of when I was born. So, what else would you like to know?
Were you the youngest then?
Yes, I was the youngest. I don't know if I mentioned that I had two half brothers and one full brother. Eddie was my full brother, and Henry and Joe were my half brothers, and Mary was my half sister. And they're all gone now. So.
Were they quite older when you were born?
What?
Were they older when you were born?
Oh yes, they were all in their 20s. I was a trailer.
Oh, so they were all in their 20s when you came
yes,
along.
because see, this is
okay.
my dad was married the second time.
Right.
See, his first wife died when Henry and Joe and Mary were just little, about 2 to 6 years old. So he was left with 3 small children. And then he later married my mother. So,
Well, wait a minute, she ain't ready yet.
Go ahead. I'm ready.
I don't remember too much what I did when I was small, but during the winter.
How about Christmases? How did you celebrate Christmases?
Well,
I mean, did you have like a Santa Claus?
there was no Santa Claus.
No Santa Claus.
I believed in the Christ child, Christkindl, and they trimmed the Christmas tree the eve before Christmas, in the afternoon, and I had to stay in the kitchen with the door closed. And believe me, I sat so still, I did not move. And they trimmed the tree. After it was trimmed, then I could go and see it.
And what would they put on the tree?
Oh, they had all kinds of decorations, and paper decorations, and they popcorn strings, and
They had no electricity back then,
no,
right? So
there were candles.
candles. Did they ever worry about the candles burning the tree?
Oh yeah, we.
So you wouldn't let them burn very long?
No.
Did you have presents under the tree?
Oh yeah, my mother used to hide the presents, before Christmas, and she had a wardrobe in an empty room, and she put those presents in there. And I found those presents one time. I was snooping around. And the next time I went in there was a little switch in there.
Oh!
And boy, I never went in there again.
What would they wrap them with?
Don't ask me.
They
I don't
weren't
know.
wrapped?
I don't think they were wrapped. I don't know.
They
I
would
can't
have
remember
paper.
that. But I'm sure they didn't have the paper and stuff to wrap them at that time. It's a long time ago.
Did you have Christmas stockings?
No, I never had a Christmas stocking, but I still remember when I got my first crayons and a writing tablet. And I thought that was just so wonderful. Oh, I just loved those crayons and to color with,
Oh, sure.
Would you get like a sled or a toy or?
Yeah, I did get a sled, and I got dolls, but they had tin heads, you know, and they had painted heads, you know, colored blonde, you know, and then I got some later on that they closed their eyes, you know, and they went to sleep. And I got dishes, tin dishes, and so I had stuff to play with.
Did you have neighbor kids to play with?
Well, yes, Ella Heiniger lived across the road, and she was really my only one that I had to play with, you know. She was about 3 years older than I was. But we always,
What farm were you born on?
on the home place on the Brunswick Road, on where my dad bought the farm when he started farming.
Was that house already there when he bought the place, or did he build it?
He built the house, he built the barn and everything, but now they built a new house there, so it's all buried under.
So this is the farm we know as Aunt Maglin's.
Yeah, it's Uncle Eddie's, you would say.
And how long did you live there? Most of your life?
Well, until just before I got married. I lived there till 1931. And I just worked around, did housework and things, and picked potatoes in the fall, and I milked cows and everything.
So when you were born, all your brothers were already out of the house? And
Well, no, they weren't
Married.
home yet.
Oh,
They
they were still
weren't married until Uncle Henry got married in 1916, and Eddie, Uncle Eddie got married in, well, Uncle Joe, they got married in 1920, and Uncle Eddie and Aunt Maggie got married in also in 1920. So they had, go ahead,
So you got married at what age?
19.
Oh, you were 19. How'd
You
you meet?
married Uncle Art.
Yes.
How did you meet Uncle Art?
Well, he was working for my cousin Alex Pangle on where Eddie Pangle lives now. He worked for him there. And he used to haul Virginia to school in the winter because it was such a long ways to school. And I kind of met him that way. And then they used to give dances, you know, in the winter at different houses, different places, you know. And we never could go, you know, like you can go now with a car because there was no roads open, you know. So that's how I met him there.
What do you remember about my grandpa, Eddie? I mean, because he was so much older, do you remember?
Yeah,
was
well,
like
I
as a
still
young man?
remember him I remember when he got married that day. I know they got married the 23rd of November, and I remember going to the wedding. And I remember Uncle Henry's wedding. And that was in 1916. I was barely
Oh, gosh,
4 years old.
4 years old, yeah.
But I still remember how they dressed. They got ready for the wedding at Grandma Wexschreider's in Pine City. And that was the place where it was, Olive Arias lived there now. I don't know if there's some of them living there yet or not. But the house has been sort of remodeled and it's still standing. And also a shed there that we kids used to play in. We used to play house. My cousin Edith Malak and I and her brother Joey Malak, we played there when my grandpa Wexschreider was sick. He died of cancer. And we used to play out there. Then we sent Joey, he was a little younger than us, to the house to Grandma Wexschreider and asked for cookies and stuff. And then she'd say, you know, Edith would go, Joey would go in and get cookies, and then Edith would ask him when he came back with the cookies, did she say E-O? Yeah, well, that meant you could have some. But then towards the last, then she'd say, you come too often, then she'd say, that's the last one now. That's the last one.
Oh. Did you grow up learning German?
Yes, we talked German all the time at home. I could barely talk English when I went to school. But now I have forgotten. It's hard for me to, but I still can say some words.
And where did you go to school?
District 7 on the Brunswick Road.
At what age did you start?
Well, I started when I was 7, I think, and I went till I was 14.
And how did you get there?
Walked. We had to walk.
Which would be how much? Miles?
Oh, I think it was 3/4 of a mile. You cut across Heinegger's Field and go up that way. Go straight up to Earhart's that way and out on the Brunswick Road.
And in the winter you walked too?
Yes. My cousins, the Mike R. Pangle kids, they walked over, I think it was 2 miles or more. And there was a lot of kids coming out west, like the Prangover kids and Burnaker kids. That's a long ways from there.
And what would you wear for
Well,
in the
we
winter?
had wool socks on, like our mothers could knit stockings, and we didn't have any slacks. The girls didn't wear slacks then, oh no. So we wore wool socks and long coats, you know, wool mittens that the mothers knit, and they were good with knitting needles at that time.
Do you remember who your teacher was?
Oh, I remember every one of them.
Oh, you had more
But
than
the
one?
first one was Ethel Carlson, was Ethel E. Dean, and the last one was Carol Kelly from Pine City. Oh, they were all from Pine City.
What was the last grade you completed?
8th grade. So I passed some of this, we had exams, you know, every spring, you know, in the 7th and 8th grade. And I passed most of the exams in the 7th grade, so I didn't have just a few, maybe a couple to pass in the 8th grade.
And you had all your subjects, English and math and science. And,
Yeah, grammar.
and how did they become a teacher?
What?
If they wanted to be a teacher, what did they have to do extra?
Well, they had to take a year, go to high school and take a year in normal school to be a teacher. And I kind of wanted to be a teacher, but, well, my folks thought it was terrible. There were no buses in those days to Pine City, you know. So I would have had to stay in town, and, oh no, they wouldn't let me do that. So I just come through with an 8th grade education.
What did you eat for lunch at school?
Well, we had sandwiches, maybe some cold meat sandwiches, like pork or anything that went, you know, with a sandwich. And a lot of times we had some homemade sausage, and, well, a lot of kids had peanut butter sandwiches. And a lot of kids had sardines in their sandwiches. And then they'd have sardines, and they'd holler, "Who's got sardines? I can smell them." I don't know. Yeah, it was fun going to school. We had a lot of fun. All those kids.
Who were some of your good friends that you went to school with?
Well, it was Ella and Elizabeth Heinegger. You know, I even put in a year with Mary Ozen. She was in her last grade, and I was in the 1st grade. And Helen Schlager also. And then there was all the younger ones, the Mike R. kids, all of those, most of them. And I just can't, I know I've got them all written down, but Bernicker kids and Prangover kids, and I don't know if I mentioned Leonie Umbar. You know, she used to come to school. I can still remember her because she came to school and she was, around her mouth, she was always full of egg yolk. Well, she had eggs for breakfast. The kids used to wipe off her face. And maybe I shouldn't be talking like this about
No,
her.
that's good.
But, and then, so now when I get hungry, she used to have egg sandwiches to school too. And I said, even now when I fry me an egg, and I just love a whole egg and then, you know, make a sandwich out of it, you know. I think of Leona Jacobson, and then I say, well, I'm gonna have a Leona Jacobson sandwich.
What were your parents like? Were they strict?
Oh yes, very strict.
Even though you were the baby,
Yeah.
you weren't
Well,
spoiled?
because my dad told my mother, I remember that one time, I don't know what I did. I did something that wasn't right, and he said to her, you just leave her do everything. So from there on, she was more strict then. So I guess she
How
was,
old was your mother when you were born?
let's see now. Well, she was quite a bit younger than my dad, you know. She was only 17 when she married my dad. So, well, you have to figure that out. I really never
Yeah.
did.
But she was probably in her 30s or...
Yeah, she must have been, yeah.
And did you have to do chores when you were a little girl?
Well, no, I didn't have to do chores, no. But, when I stayed there by, at home then till I, you know, left there when I got married, I used to help milk cows because the hired man, he didn't like to milk cows. So he gave me $5 a month
$5.
for milking cows
Back then, that was quite a fortune.
because he didn't like to milk the cows, see? So then I went picking potatoes and other little jobs around. So,
Did you ever milk cows with someone named Henry Blank?
yes, he used to be a hired man there. And he used to get to go on weekends, you know, and well, half the time, you know, he didn't really come back on Sunday, but that one time he came back to milk cows, and he was kind of snuckered up, you know, and we used to milk outside when it was hot in the summer. And it was a nice cow yard there, you know, and a big elm tree, and there was shade. It was so nice to milk cows, and cows would stand for you, you know, and you milk cows. And so he came home one night and sat down by a cow and started milking, and yeah, I could tell he was, you know. So he was milking and milking, and pretty soon the cow took a notion and she just walked away from him. And of course, he still sat there. He was milking, you know, just like he was
With no
milking.
cow.
And I laughed, and oh, he really got ticked off about that. He didn't like that one bit. I always laugh about that.
Now, we came from kind of a musical family. When Grandpa Engelbert's, great-grandpa Engelbert came.
Yeah.
Now, did they all play musical instruments?
Well, I guess they all just about played the accordion to some extent, you know, but really,
Did Grandpa Alex play, too?
oh yes, he played the accordion, and he liked to dance. My mother didn't.
Oh, really?
So Anna Peters and Mary Albright, they used to dance with them all the time. And I was told that Mrs. Peters, so that would be Jerome Peters' mother, grandmother, she was my dad's sister.
Right, that's Catherine.
And my dad and her, this came from Helen Peters. She told me that they were the champion dancers on the Brunswick Road.
Really?
And they'd sing together too.
Wow.
So,
Now you play accordion.
yeah, a little bit.
And what age did you start?
Oh, I was about 5 or 6, I think. I had, that accordion was upstairs in a box. And it belonged to my sister Bertha, the one that died when she was 12 years old. And I used to go up there, and I'd sneak in that junk room where we kept all the stuff, you know, in the junk that wasn't used. And I'd sit there and I'd play that accordion, and I learned how to play it all by myself. I remember the first tune I played was When You Wore a Tulip. And, you know, I just fiddled around like that, you know, played once in a while.
And then they said that you could have it.
Yeah, they let me have it.
Did you have dances at your home? That's
Oh,
what
yes,
you did?
yeah. They danced a lot there in the kitchen. They'd take the stove out, and they'd take the kitchen cabinet out, and that would go out on the porch, and have an accordion player, and they'd dance, and they had the best times there. I can still remember those dances when I was a kid. And your grandfather, Joe M. and Alex Pangle, they were dancing polka one night with Mary Frank Pangle, Stonehouse Frank's daughter. And they were gonna play her out, but they didn't. She played them out.
So you just decide we're gonna have a dance
Yeah.
on any night, and then word of mouth?
Well, then there was a telephone then, then, that I can remember. And then you just invite the neighbors around.
And they would just all bring food and...
Well, I don't know. See, I can't remember any food. I don't remember if somebody brought food or... I don't remember that. I was thinking about that one day. They must have had food. I don't know what they had, because I don't know. They had some beer or what. But I know later on there was beer. So...
Did Grandma and Grandpa ever talk about when they came over from Germany? Did they ever,
About what?
when they came from Germany?
Very little. My mother said she didn't want to talk about it because she was so sick all the way over from on the ship, because they had to go, some people said they, I don't know, something came with the animals. They had animals on board, too, and stuff. So my mother said she don't want to hear anything from that. She was so sick all the way over.
They just wanted to forget that it
Yeah.
ever existed.
Mhm. So I don't know, my dad came over, I don't know whether he came over. They said he was already married when he came over, but that's not true, because I looked that up, and I can't believe that. So,
Why would people want to come over here? What would make them?
well, I think to better themselves, and also it was kind of the war. They had to go in the service over there, and that they didn't want. They wanted to get away from that.
Tell us a story about, we have a little ding dong here.
About what?
Oh, tell us a story about Whoopie John. Isn't there a story about Whoopie John? And some
Oh,
songs?
yeah.
Let's wait till this gets done. Okay.
What is that? Is that clock something that you have?
That's the clock my mother and father had in their living room.
Really?
It just struck me.
And it still works. It's great.
Oh, yeah,
That's
I had it
beautiful.
redone. It was Keith's cousin, my son-in-law's cousin, that fixed it up.
Now, would they have brought that over from
Oh, no,
Germany?
no.
It's from-
They bought it here. I imagine it's the Sears Roebuck clock, because that's what we were told. Richard took it up north one day to some,
Like an
antique buyer, and he said it looks like it's a Sears Roebuck clock.
Well, anyway, tell us about Whoopi John and the songs.
Oh,
That story.
Engelbert, my grandfather,
Okay.
he wrote his own music. He wrote his notes. He had a little red book. I wonder who's got that book now. I don't know. And so one day we were wondering, and Evelyn was very sick, and she wanted a radio real bad, And we thought if she could we take this book to Whoopi John, maybe she could get a radio. So Art and I think Norval, our brother, and I think you and Lucille, Richard and Lucille were with us. We went to the cities, and we had to meet with Whoopi John. It was on a Sunday, and he was practicing with his band at the Astoria Hotel. And I took that book into him, and he said, there's really some hot stuff in this book. But I never heard any more from the book, but although he got off track now.
You gave him the book?
No, he looked at it and he said there's some hot stuff in that book. But he said they were gonna see what they could get out of it, you know. But he took the book and I never heard any more. But he used to play on Sundays sometime, and then he'd say, now we're gonna play a tune from the Little Red Book. And that's the last we've ever heard of it.
And nobody knows whatever
No,
happened to
whatever happened to it now, I don't know.
Wow.
But anyway, I know your grandfather one time, he met with Whoopi John up here at the ballroom, at Topic Ballroom.
Oh, okay.
But I don't know, I never heard when you did find out about it then, but to me, I didn't hear too much no more.
So a lot of the songs that we know he plays, Whoopi John, could be our grandfather's
And it
composition.
possibly could be, yeah. But you don't hear nothing much now about Whoopi John anymore. Probably some records, you know, but it's a long time ago. That
Yeah,
must
he's
have
been
been
gone
in
for a long time, I think.
a long time.
Huh.
Yeah.
Did you have Sunday school when you were a little girl? Did you go to church? What was church
Yes, well, they didn't get to church that often because, well, they didn't have no cars or nobody had any cars. And they went, you know, when they could, I guess. And we went to, after school was out, we went to Sunday school. For 2 weeks we had to go in June then. And we had to go every day. And then we had to work in the flower beds in there at the, where the priest house is now and everything. That priest house was built, I remember when it was built. And then we had to weed all the flower beds and stuff. And also in that yard where the Catholic school is now, at noon hour, then we had to go out there and pull them weeds. Some of the kids had blisters. And we were supposed to get ice cream and lemonade, but we never got it. No, then we never got it.
Were there nuns that taught you?
No, there were teachers like Ella Lahadney and
I remember her.
other ones that, I can't remember who they all were. I know there was a Miss Babcock and, so, yeah, that's the way we were instructed.
But you were married in a church.
Oh, yes,
People got married in the
yeah,
church.
yeah.
Did they have big weddings back then? I mean, everybody.
Oh, yes,
all the
they had
days.
big weddings, but I didn't have a big wedding. We just had, 2 attendants. And
Who were your attendants?
was George Pangle and Florence Pangle.
Oh.
See, they had to be 2 Catholics then, you know.
Oh,
I could have had more, you know, but that was during the Depression, and I tell you, the nickels were far and few between. So it was just a small wedding.
How did Uncle Art ask you to marry him?
Well, I don't know, he just said, well, when are we gonna get married?
And how long had you known him?
Oh, I'd say about 3 years, I think, maybe. Yeah, he worked there quite a while.
Did your parents like him?
What?
Did your parents like?
Well,
Uncle Art?
my dad was gone, but my mother, she liked him, and she said, I'm sure that your dad would appreciate him too, she said. So, that was it.
Were you pretty young when Grandpa Alex died?
17.
Okay, sounds pretty young.
And how did he die?
Well, I guess it was some sort of cancer. They couldn't operate or something. He went to Rochester, but there was no help to do.
Was he sick for a long time?
Yes. I think it was a couple of years.
So when you got married, what was your wedding like? Where did you get your wedding dress?
Well, Mrs. Lohadney, of course,
Oh, so it was bought.
yeah. I only paid $20 for my dress.
And how would you earn that money?
Well, milking cows.
From the hired hand?
No. Well, I just happened to have some money, and of course my mother helped me a little bit. And so we didn't make a big fuss over it. We had a chicken dinner and all the trimmings at Aunt Magdalene and Uncle Eddie's. And it was just the brothers and sisters. And I think it was Mike R. Pangos, because they were my baptismal sponsors. Auntie Mike, Aunt Annie and Uncle Mike. They were my baptismal sponsors.
So you go back to the farm and then have a reception and a
Yeah.
dance?
We had a big meal at noon. And then, of course, you know, the people in the neighborhood, well, what they went and done, they went to Chivaritas that same night.
Oh,
So we had to dish out a little money.
Now, that custom, where did that come from, the chivalry? I mean, who started that, chivalry? I mean,
Well, the neighbors, and you know, around there, and well, like I had a lot of cousins living around there, you know.
but would that have been something from Germany? A tradition
No.
from Germany?
Uh-uh.
No?
I don't think so. This was years ago. I mean, they used to chivalry him if they didn't give anything, you know, like a dance or something. But which they went and gave a party then for us. They we had moved into a place and there was an empty room, a big room, and they knew that, so they surprised us one Saturday night. They had, for the money we gave them, they hired some music. There was a accordion player. I think it was, his name was Bill Yumbauer. He lived up at Pekegama Lake somewhere. He was a cousin to these Yumbauers are up here. And he played, and they all brought something for lunch, and they had the best time in the world.
you know, that's what they should do now for these weddings.
Yeah.
It's so elaborate, huh?
So they had fun.
And so where did you live then? The first house when you got married was,
Down on the Meyer Farm, August Meyer Farm, down below Mary Ozen's place.
by the sinkhole?
Yeah. We lived there for 2 years.
Did you build that house?
No, we just rented the place. That's where we started farming, you know. And we went to an auction, bought cows and bought horses, and then we had two horses. One was blind, and the other one was partially blind on one. But they were good horses.
And what were their names?
Let's see, Belle and Bessie.
They couldn't see, could they? One of them?
Huh?
One of them.
Was
Yeah,
blind.
one was totally blind and one was on one eye.
How could they even?
I used to drive him on the hay fork when we went loaded hay. Can you imagine that?
So you had to help Uncle Art get this farm ready too.
Oh, yeah. We cleaned the house down there because it was a bachelor, you know. I imagine I have heard of Carl Meyer. You know, his dad owned the farm. And Carl lived there with his dad. Well, and it wasn't too dirty in there, but we found a few little bugs in there. Then we had a fumigate. And
Tin cans. Tin cans.
tin cans, they would throw it out right by the door, you know, big pile. And he had corn cobs upstairs, a big pile. He used to sell seed corn. And in the winter time, I suppose that's what you did, was shell that seed corn upstairs. And boy, oh boy, for the mice up in that house.
Oof.
I had to, and one time,
I would have
there was
moved
an
out.
empty ketchup bottle sitting on the cupboard in the kitchen. I got up one morning and I looked at that bottle. Here there was 2 mice in that ketchup bottle. How did they get in there? The ketchup bottle was empty.
Did you have much for furniture?
No, I didn't have too much. We bought a bed and a dresser, which I still have upstairs. And I got the stove I got from my mother that she had bought from Grandma Wickshiler. And I used that kitchen range. And let's see now. Oh, I got the sewing machine from my mother, and then I bought a dining room table. Otherwise I didn't really buy much furniture, some chairs and whatever we needed.
What did you get for wedding presents? Dishes and...
Well, there weren't any showers that time, really. So, whatever, I can't really remember. I know I got a beautiful picture of the Last Supper. I still have that upstairs. And a big bread mixing pan. So, you know, I bake bread. I said, when the kids were growing up, it seems to me I bake bread 3 times a week. And now I don't do that at all.
So how soon after you got married did you have your first child?
Well, let's see now. Lucille was born in January, then we got married in April. And then, to a surprise, then was, Richard was born just 10 months after Lucille was born, so believe me, it was just like twins.
So actually it's the same year then?
Yeah, actually, they were both born in 1932. Because when they started school, I wrote a note. Well, Lucille started before Richard, and then Richard started later. And I wrote a note then when Richard started that he was born in 1932. I got a note back from the teacher. Must be a mistake. This is Eva Blast.
Well, I've heard of her.
Yeah,
I've heard of her.
but so I had to write a note back again.
So when you had a baby, what type of clothing did you have to put
Well,
in?
I sit down and write an order to Sears Roebuck or for some flannel, and I made little kimonos, you know, little outfits, you know, out of flannel, trimmed it with pink or blue tape, you know, and trimmed it up a little bit, and just really ordered some shirts and made diapers. We washed diapers for all of my kids.
They didn't have disposable.
Heat the water up and...
You bet, you pump the water by hand, and
So you were busy in the house, then who helped Uncle Art on the farm?
well, he did most of it himself, and then there was always some of his brothers, they would stay there. Otto stayed with us a lot. He was really my babysitter. He took care of the kids. You know, he was tease, tell us she's nothing but an old mud hen because she always walked through the water with her shoes on when it rained, you know. But one time we went to town, he was supposed to take care of the kids. It was very dry and dusty. So we went to town, I don't know if I had to go to the dentist or something. And when we came home, we saw nothing but dust and dust and dust. Here, it was about, well, it was in the forenoon, but he had hooked up the horses on the drag, and he was dragging. And he had put the kids to bed. Put them in the crib, both of them. I had 2 cribs. So I said, Otto, I said, I got to have a talk with you. I said, you can't ever do that again. I said, go out in the field and with the horses and stuff and leave the kids, because you don't know if they were going to go to sleep or not. Well, I don't know if they did or not, but anyway, they were safe. But I told him he can't do that anymore.
Very nice. Stop.
It's like when...
Well, I don't know. I was fooled a couple of times, and it was nothing. So then, I don't know, I got sick about 12 o'clock, I guess, and, well, called the doctor, and he came out, Dr. Stratty, and he never went home. He stayed all of the rest of the night, about midnight, and he stayed all night and all day till about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And then Lucille was born. She was very,
Blue baby.
oh,
Blue baby.
she was sort of blue when she arrived. So, the doctor, he immersed her in warm water, as warm as she could take it. And then after that, he took a dipper of ice cold water and poured it on her chest. And boy, she cried and hollered. Oh, she sure had a good voice then. I can hear that yet.
Did someone stay and help you?
Well, yeah,
Did you
and
then?
Mary was there, my sister was there, and Emma was there, your grandmother. Yeah. And that was the same thing when Richard was born. Then I guess they had an awful time with Art Pangle. He was a little older than Richard. He was born in July and Richard in November. And he cried and cried, I guess, at home for his ma, because she went up to came up to our place, see? So she was there then too, when Richard was born.
Now, Uncle Art, he would have waited outside or in another room when you were giving birth?
No,
They
he
didn't
was there.
watch.
He
Oh, he
there.
was?
Oh, yes. I didn't have, I had doctor helping when Richard was born, because Stratty was, let's see, he was out of town, yeah. So we had doctor helping. So I had 2 babies to take care of.
10 months apart.
Was Uncle Art a good father?
Well, he was pretty good, yeah.
He was pretty funny.
I don't think kids ever got a licking. You do?
I will leave the room. Richard's leaving.
I think I did that. I used to pat him on the rear.
You were more the
Yeah.
disciplinarian? Dad, do you have any questions you wanna ask Aunt Leona?
Not really.
No?
You know it all.
Oh, I could tell you one though, and she was talking about Lucille and Richard being born the same year. And it wasn't long afterwards they moved down to Rock Lake. And Michael Luzon always said, he says, I don't know why that Art Jacobson left that farm. He raised 2 crops in 1 year.
See, he was our neighbor when we lived on that Meyer place, see, Mike Rosen. Yeah. And he told me where to plant my garden, which I did then, and oh boy, did we have stuff in the garden that time. He told me.
And then you canned for winter?
Yeah, I
You-
can, some, you know. I remember one time Art went thrashing, helped with the thrashing at Heiniger's. And he come home, he had a big sack full of apples. Those little crab apples, you know. We'd leave the stems on, you know, and just pick off the butts, you know, and then I canned apples. God, they were so good, them apples. They're called strawberry crabs. So,
So what would you do? Like, what would be a typical day? You would wake up and...
well, I suppose it's just get up and get the cows milked, and we had some chickens and took care of those and did the work, like did up the dishes, the breakfast dishes, and you had a separator to wash, and you separated the milk to get the cream. We had to wash that separator and those discs all the time, and the cooking, and with 2 kids, well, that was a lot.
Did you have a playpen to put them in, or they just
No, they
crawled
just
all over?
just run wild.
So you had to work in the house and outside.
Yeah, I did a little bit outside. I had a garden, and we had a big garden down by Rock Lake. We lived there for 4 years, and we had a nice garden there. It goes down by the lake, and we had watermelons, because it was sandy ground there, and so we had plenty to eat all the time.
Why did you move from the first house?
Well, because it was such a hilly place, that first one. It was very hilly, and there were no tractors. We didn't have any tractors then around. Not much. Maybe there was a couple around the neighborhood. So then we farmed there for 4 years in Rock Lake. So that took up 6 years of our life already there.
You could have bought the farm at Rock Lake.
Yeah, for $2,000. But we didn't have no $2,000.
It's during the,
It was terrible, you know, the depression. Nobody had any money.
how many
They
acres?
wouldn't even borrow you any money.
How many acres?
Oh, I think it was 120 acres. Of course, there was some lake,
Now look at.
some in the lake there,
Look what
Rock
that
Lake.
property over there is worth now, those new houses going
Yeah.
up over there. Wow.
So now there's new houses up there at Rock Lake and everything.
The old house is still there,
Beautiful houses.
The old house is still there? Really?
Mhm.
but it isn't the same.
We go down and take a trip around there every spring, it seems like, and I don't know, I just feel like I could sit and cry, because it's not the same, it's not the same. Of course, the things aren't supposed to be the same, I guess. But,
So when you would move, would the neighbors help and they
oh
just
yes,
bring
and
wagons?
they just love that, yeah.
Didn't you herd the cattle from,
And sometimes they drive the cattle, you know.
instead of hauling
But then there was a place one time we didn't know where we were gonna go. We were almost gonna come back and move back down on the Meyer place, but then it was sold before we ever got anything made out. So,
it? They moved. You moved.
I moved 7 times.
In how many
That's-
years?
Well, I don't know.
7 times in your lifetime you've moved, is that true?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. So when did Franny come along then?
Well, she come along about 8 years later after Richard. I was
That was the Bernie Blank place.
sick all the time and stuff, and I don't know, then they thought it was gallbladder trouble, and well, then it was Franny, I guess. And, well, then after that, I had to have gallbladder surgery.
And did those kids walk to school?
Certainly.
Now,
Sure
did
they
you go
walked
to
to
District
school.
7 too then?
They didn't start school until we moved down here on Lee
Went to
White
Oh, because you were,
place.
oh, okay.
Then they went to the West Rock School. Lucille started school there, and so did Richard.
We started in Greeley.
Huh?
Greeley.
Lucille was going to West Rock, down at the,
Oh yeah, that was before Greeley. West Rock.
not West Rock, at
Oh, Meadowbank.
Meadowbank School, down by Alfred Pearson's place, and that would be,
Ronald Burdan.
Ronnie Burdan's place now. That's where she started school. Then she went to West Rock. Then Richard started in West Rock.
Oh,
Then
so-
they went to Greeley. We moved to Greeley. And then from Greeley we moved to Bernie Blank's farm. We lived there for 7 years. Then we moved out here.
So what year did you buy this place then?
1948. I lived here now for 52 years.
Did you start to rent it at first or you bought it?
We bought it right away.
Fred Feige.
Bought it from Feige's.
I've heard that name, why is that name
Abra.
familiar? I've heard
I know
Feige.
Milton Feige
Milton
was
Feige.
a friend
Oh,
of
that's.
you
Milton
and
Yeah.
Dad
Feige.
and neighborhood play. So did Uncle Art always farm?
Yeah, until the last few years of this place here. Then he worked in the cities for, I think he worked there for 13 years.
Oh, he did? I never knew that. Where did he work in the
Well, he
cities?
worked on the bridges and construction, you know.
Oh. I didn't know that. Janie, did you know that?
Yes.
Oh, you didn't know that, so I didn't know
That's all I knew he did. I don't remember
Oh,
farming.
see, I don't know.
Oh, I guess I do, because when they fill silo, he was always there.
Yeah, well, yeah, we farmed that first year,
Well, he used to haul milk for Greeley.
yeah, and then he hauled milk, you know, for Greeley. Then he hauled for himself the last few years. Yeah.
Tell her.
Was he always a joker and a funny man?
Yeah,
I kinda think so.
yeah, I think he was.
Tell her.
And I said, and they said after Art passed away, it seemed like Otto took over. And you know, I can still see that Otto, and there was such a resemblance between them two, I don't know.
About the Armistice Blizzard.
Huh?
About the Armistice Day Blizzard. How that started.
Do you remember that day?
Oh, yes, I remember that well, that Armistice Day blizzard, that was in 1940. My God, it was such a warm day, and all of a sudden it
Rained,
turned,
wasn't it? It rained first,
well, it was damp like, you know.
because the lines.
And I know we were supposed to go out to Uncle Eddie's to butcher a pig, help him butcher a pig. Dad was supposed to help him. And there was no school that day because it was Armistice Day. So we had early lunch at noon and we went out. And they butchered that pig. And before we got started for home, it was the worst blizzard you ever saw. Well, we made it home. We had a Model T Ford, and we made it.
No Model A.
Model A, I mean. And we made it okay, but we were blocked in then. And people, we didn't have no electricity there. And some people didn't have, there was electricity then, you know, some places, but not where we lived yet. And they come and borrowed our gas engine then because to pump water for their cattle. And was Ernest and I think George Pangle, they got through somehow with an old wreck of a car. It was an old truck that Ernest had. And he borrowed the gas engine and everything so they could pump some water for their cattle, which they got done. Well, it was several days before we could get out because everything was just so blocked up.
Do you know anyone that was maybe trapped on the road, or did everyone get home safe that you know?
Well, around here, I guess, I didn't hear of any deaths, but I guess there was, you
It
know.
was deer hunting too. Wasn't it up north?
Well, no, I don't
thought-
think so. I don't
It was
really
right around
remember.
deer hunting season. I thought there was a.
Not before deer hunting
Was
season.
that before then?
Yeah, it was.
I think it
All
was
them
be-
duck hunters died down
I
there.
think deer hunting was always later than what it is right now,
No, never
you know,
was
at
before
that
the
time.
15th.
Tell about when they took the snow out of the yard, they used, what do you call them doubles you saw trees down with? You know, you saw with these saws.
Oh, the sun.
What do you call them?
Crosscut saw?
Crosscut saw. They sawed the snow blocks in our driveway. And
Oh,
hauled
yeah.
them on the sled out to the cow yard, because they couldn't, they had no plows. Big chunks and loaded them up on the sled and hauled them away.
Yeah, it was a lot of snow. That road was so blocked, that driveway coming in from the Brunswick Road into the house there, on Bernie Blank's place. It was just, I know Dad parked the car in there then, and you couldn't see the car from the sides if the banks were so high.
You had a barn for the cattle, and
Oh, yeah.
so
yeah.
they were
There was-
safe.
There was a barn there. Barn
Did you
was-
ever have to tie a rope from the house to the barn
No,
to get
no,
to it?
no.
That's
Not
only
that I
a
know
house
of,
in
not
the
that
prairie.
I know
Yeah, I know, I
of.
was gonna
Not
say that.
that I know of.
A little off in the house in the prairie, they always so we wouldn't get lost in the blizzard. Right.
So you had telephone and electricity when you moved in this house?
Not electricity. We didn't have, oh yeah, but here. You
Yeah,
mean here?
here.
On this place?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a place that we lived there down, next to Ronnie Burden, where there was no phone there either. And that was awful. Couldn't talk to anybody.
Did you have a lot of company On weekend, like on a Sunday, was that your visiting day?
Oh, well, we used to go out down to Grandma Jacobson's, and they used to come over, and I know one time we weren't home, and then they had gotten well, we never locked the door, they got in the house, and they fixed up all kinds of dummies, stepped around the table and everything, and when we got home, I looked, I couldn't figure out what was going on, all that dummies sitting around the table. Yeah, we'd have birthday parties, you know, and
They used to
celebrate.
celebrate everybody's birthday, didn't they? Every time
Yeah,
it was a birthday.
really,
they
we
used to
always
have
had birthday parties, and, yeah.
Yeah, 'cause I remember when our grandmas and great grandmas still living. They always had
Making
birthday parties.
homemade egg noodles, how you made those, and hung them over the,
Yeah, I'd put a towel over a chair, you know, and we'd make the homemade, my mother used to make them homemade egg noodles, put a dish towel over the back of the chair, and then she'd roll out that dough, you know, for noodles, and then, so they get a little dry, and let them hang there for a while.
strip.
And then she'd cut them, you know, in strips, and then she'd make noodle soup, you know,
Hanging over
chicken
the
noodle
back of the
soup.
chair to dry.
Really?
But I've never done that before, I never
I
did that.
remember that. You did.
I think the last one I saw do that was Mrs. Ozen, Mary Ozen's mother.
Oh, yeah?
I don't know what I was doing up there that time. I was just,
They made good noodles, them old German
I can still see that.
women.
She had them hanging right in front of the oven,
Mm-hmm. So they kind of dry and.
you know, she cut them.
I know when, let's see, that must have been when Fran and Nordine got married. I know it was on a Sunday, we came out here and we butchered chickens for the wedding. My mother, that was down here, my mother, she was still living then, she had to make the noodle soup for lunch that day. So she made the noodle soup for lunch,
Why? Because of the chicken.
so,
They were cleaning chickens.
yeah.
See, she had a chicken to make the
Broth.
So we had a good lunch of chicken noodle soup that day. The other chickens were saved, I think they got married on a Tuesday.
And you had the party here too? The party for Lucille was here?
You mean for what?
The wedding?
Oh, that was up at the town hall,
Was it the
the
town hall?
reception.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I remember.
Yeah, we had chicken dinner.
I remember
Tell about the weddings, before the weddings, what you got together.
Well, before the wedding, I had a bunch of
Any
women.
of the weddings, you should get, the neighbors would go together.
Yeah, the neighbors come and they help, you know, and everything to get ready for Lucille's wedding. So we butchered chickens one day also, and we got them all ready, and then Aunt Magdalene, she took them up there and she fried them the day before the wedding, and then the next day she put them in the roasters and she put them in the oven for us for the wedding, for the noon meal. So we had mashed potatoes and gravy and dressing and a vegetable, carrots, peas and carrots and a cabbage salad, I believe. And we had wedding cake and everything that went with it. I mean, everything was out at the town hall.
Except the dance.
Well, they didn't
And
have
we
the
had
dance
the
there?
dance at the topic, the wedding dance.
Oh. Well, the topic was still open at that time? When did the topic close?
When Doris and Leonard got married, wasn't it, when the roof caved in?
Yeah.
The roof caved in?
Yeah.
Really?
The snow was so heavy, and then the roof caved in, so Leonard, that day of the wedding, after he got married, he was running around the Holland City trying to find a place to find the first
To have the dance.
So they had it at the Armory.
Oh, really?
How would you like that?
Oh, that would be a little scary, huh? Last minute, wow.
So, was your mother, after your dad died, who lived with your mother?
Well, she lived with Nagel and Uncle Eddie, you know.
Oh,
She
they
stayed
moved
right
in
there.
there.
they
Oh.
stayed.
Yeah, well, she lived there all the time, you know. That was, I don't know, my dad had that all made out, that she was supposed to stay there on the place, you know.
Tell her where you lived in the place and how two families lived there. How many families lived there at one time?
Well, there were 3 families living there at one time at Uncle Eddie's there. There was when Aunt Emma and Uncle Joe lived there one time when Bernard was a baby, and just before Genevieve was born, because they came from Rutledge. They had been up in Rutledge, and then it didn't go up there, so they came back to Pine City. They couldn't find a place to live. Everybody was renting places and houses and farms, and no place to live. So they moved in for the summer there then by Uncle Eddie's. And of course, I was there, Mary was there, and my parents were living there yet. And well, then
Who lived where then in the house?
Genevieve was born, and Aunt Emma and Uncle Joe, they had the living room there. And my folks had the, grandma's room.
Grandma's room that was off
Yeah.
to
Yeah, well, that was gone a long time
the,
ago.
right.
And, and then we had a room upstairs, to sleep. And so there was 3 families there at one time. And then there was company from the cities yet. They came up, but I don't think they stayed there that time. I think they must have went someplace else.
Was it
It was
relatives
just
from the cities?
impossible,
Was it relatives from the cities, or?
Yeah, it was some cousins. They always came up here every summer. And, they just kind of made themselves at home.
Was it Pangrel side or Wakeshider side?
It was from the Lakeshiders.
Oh, Wakeshiders, okay.
Tell them about the blueberry picking up north. When you used to go blueberry picking. No.
Well, this would go on.
Well, it's,
I remember one time we went picking blueberries up to Rutledge, up to Paul Pangrel's, my uncle, the youngest Pangrel uncle I had. And he,
who went?
well, it was my dad and mother and Uncle Eddie, and I think it was, I don't think Uncle Eddie was
I thought
married
there was
yet
somebody
then.
from the cities up.
Yeah, the Brandles were up here, my aunt and uncle. They wanted to go up there and pick blueberries, and that was many years ago. They took milk cans and milk buckets, and where in the world they all sat when they had an Overland touring car, where there was no trunk, I don't think. I don't know where they put all those blueberries to. They came in with, berries, my God. I don't know how they ever got everything home. And that was just something.
All right.
Okay.
I have an accident there.
Okay now?
Okay, yep.
Well, here are some weather predictions. Years ago there were no radios or anything like that, so they had to go by something. Now, if the corn husks were thick and hard to pull off, it meant a cold winter. And if they were skimpy, a mild winter. When there were a lot of acorns on the oak trees, it meant a cold winter and lots of snow. Sundogs are bright spots on each side of the sun. If there are 2, if the one on the south side of the sun fades first, get ready for cold winter. If the one on the north fades first, expect warm weather. In the fall of the year, watch the squirrels. If they bury their nuts near the tree trunk, a winter of heavy snow is ahead. People watch their hogs. They had no fancy hog houses, so they slept in the straw pile. If they made their beds on the south side of the straw pile, then it would be cold weather coming, and if they made their beds on the north side, it would be warm. March 12th is St. Gregory. If the sun shines, the bear sits in the sun and patches his mittens for another 4 weeks of winter. And if it's a stormy day, he tears down his hut for nice spring weather. Christmas Eve, midnight, if the moon and stars are out, the people's barns will be full of hay for the winter. And if it's a dark Christmas midnight, the barns will be empty. This is a German saying. Grandma Pangrel always said, it rhymes very good in German. When the new moon is standing on its toes, it allows all the water to run out and it will be wet until it changes again. After the first thunder in spring, 6 months later, there will be frost. Old timers did their planting by the moon. Crops planted above the ground had to be planted in full moon. Root crops in the dark of the moon. Potatoes had to be planted on Good Friday, whether it came in March or April. Butchering was done when it was full moon, or else the meat would shrink or spoil. Whatever direction the wind is from on Good Friday, it will be for 40 days and until Ascension Day. If it rains Easter Sunday, it will rain for 7 Sundays after. If frogs start hollering in early evening, it will rain before morning. If there is a storm brewing, birds will stop singing, will all of a sudden, and there's no air motion, get ready for a windstorm or cyclone. If the rain and wind come together, it won't be so bad. If chickens sit around oiling their feathers, that was another sign of rain. Then the moisture would roll off their backs. Flies also tell when it's going to rain or change in the weather. They sit on the screen door and want to come in. When frogs holler so many days before Easter, that many days they'll freeze up after Easter. These are some of the weather predictions that are from the farmer, which Art had clipped and saved. So, and then the rest, some recipes in here. What do you want? Is this you?
So, Uncle Art, was he sick very long before he died? Uncle Art Jacobson?
Well, he had a stroke about, I think it was about 2 years before he died, and then he recuperated pretty good, and then 2 years later he had another stroke, and that kind of, and he was doing pretty well. He was at Sister Kenny's, but he was real good that day, and all of a sudden I got a call from the hospital that he had passed away. It went that fast. He had a massive heart attack.
And how old was he?
69.
And then you continued to live here, and Richard's
I've
lived
lived
with you?
here ever since. So I've lived here now for 52 years altogether.
A couple more years, hopefully.
And is there any words of advice you'd like to tell us so we can lead our lives as good as you did?
For
Well,
the next generation anyway.
just to keep on plugging away, I guess that's all you can do. I said, keep praying.
Stay away from the cricket. And wooshkies.
And wishes. Yeah.
Did you end up there last night, Joanna?
Nope.
He's a good
And
boy.
Eddie went home.
Well, we're gonna end this, I think, and we appreciate your time, Aunt Leona. And, any other thing you wanna say, Jamie?
No, we just love your stories.
Yeah, we just, would like this to go on for the next generation, so. Okay, there we go. Okay, thanks again, Aunt Leona.